everyone! In today's video, I'm going to be introducing a new RC drift build. I've had a lot of fun these past few months with the Budget 180 drift project, and I've really enjoyed the build process and the added challenge and realism of rear-wheel drive drifting. I have been making some progress both with the suspension and weight distribution as well as the body and interior, so I'm hoping to have a part 4 video of the Budget RC drift build up in the next week or two. But with winter arriving and with it bringing freezing temperatures, ice and snow, driving RC vehicles outdoors or in non-climate controlled environments becomes a bit less enjoyable. So it's this time of year that I like to turn my attention to some indoor projects like the scale shop build and some smaller scale RC vehicles. I decided I wanted to build a small scale RC drift car, so I logged into eBay and began searching for the cheapest model car I could find to use as a base. After some deliberation, I placed a few bids, and 5 days and $3 later, I wound up with this 1991 Pontiac Firebird. I believe this is a monogram model kit, and if my measurements are correct, this is a 1/24th scale replica. As you'd expect for a built model car at this price, this isn't exactly going to be winning any Best in Show awards, but it's perfect for a cheap RC build. Aside from rear view mirrors and the passenger seat, this car is complete and the body looks great with no cracks or damage. For those who don't know, the Firebird was built on GM's F-body platform, which it shared with the Chevy Camaro. The third generation of this platform, which is what this car is replicating, was introduced for the 1982 model year and ended in 1992. You don't really see that many third-gen F-body drift cars, despite these cars being relatively prevalent and cheap rear-wheel drive vehicles, at least here in the US. As it turns out, there's a lot of reasons why these cars aren't an ideal platform for drifting. From the often lackluster and brittle drivetrain, manual transmissions being uncommon and completely unavailable from the factory on the most powerful V8 engines, and these cars' notorious lack of unibody structural rigidity are just a few reasons why many drifters shy away from this platform. However, while researching and collecting information for this project, I came across some epic third-gen drift builds, including several built by some guys in Japan that not only drift on point but look incredible as well, and I'll definitely be using those cars as inspiration. I don't recall ever seeing a rear-wheel drive RC drift car in this scale, and I haven't seen too many model car to RC conversions, so I'm limited on what I can use as a reference. I have done several model car to RC conversions in the past, but this is my most ambitious project yet. Initially when planning this build, I wanted to use an independent rear suspension. This would allow for more adjustability than a straight axle like what came on all Firebirds from the factory. However, I happen to already have a straight axle that I designed a while back and used for a drag car that I think will fit nearly perfectly onto the Firebird. The differential is locked, and minus the lack of a torque arm, it's the same basic layout with 2 control arms and a mount for a panhard bar behind the axle. Although using this axle won't allow for any camber, caster, or toe adjustability like an independent suspension would, it's already built and looks super scale, so I'm going to try it out and see what happens. Hopefully the resin gears in this thing end up holding up. I've beaten the crap out of this axle and I haven't had an opportunity to re-grease the gears in a long time since I stripped one of the tiny screws and now I can't open up the axle housing to access the gears. Also, this giant crack running along the bottom isn't really inspiring confidence, but it feels pretty smooth when rotating, so we'll see what happens. Ideally, I'd like to keep the interior intact, or at least as much as possible. This is going to drastically reduce the amount of space for electronics, but I think I can work around it. Fortunately, this car has a relatively large front end, which should easily house the motor, steering servo, and hopefully the ESC as well. Before going any further with this build, I needed to completely disassemble the car. It can sometimes be a huge pain to disassemble a built model car like this, however, this car was effortless to take apart. I started with the hood and intake, and then moved on to the bumpers. There's a fairly large cavity between the back of the interior and the top of the chassis piece, accessible by removing the rear bumper. With some luck, I might be able to squeeze the battery and receiver in the back, though it will be very tight if it does fit. This is at least a great place for the battery as it fits perfectly and is easy to access by simply removing the rear bumper piece. All it would take is a few magnets to hold this piece and allow it to easily be removed. I was really lucky that this chassis wasn't glued to the interior tub or body. Also, this chassis is one solid piece which will provide a great platform to mount everything to. And again, the interior simply slid right out. I definitely got lucky with this model. The undercarriage of the car looked awesome. Whoever painted this did a good job, although I don't think I've ever seen a gold catalytic converter before. The interior looks nice, but very plain. I think I'll be trading the stock steering wheel for a racing wheel and putting in some racing seats, a roll cage, and a new handbrake lever. At this time, I don't have any climate-controlled environments that I can paint in, so painting the body is probably going to have to wait until spring. For now, I'll be rocking the primer and maybe adding some bolt-on fender flares. What do you guys think I should do with the body? With all the major parts separated, I wanted to focus on the chassis. I needed to remove everything until nothing but the chassis piece remained. Stripping all the parts off the chassis was a bit more difficult than the previous disassembly, but still not too bad. I did my best to be careful not to damage the chassis and the components being removed in case I wanted to use them for something else in the future. To remove the rear end, I was able to drill out the control arms to disconnect them from the chassis, and then I wiggled everything back and forth until it came loose. With the rear end off, I did a quick test fit of the new rear axle. I will be removing the old control arm mounts from the chassis before installing this axle. The fitment looked great, but to give myself some extra room, I decided to remove the exhaust system. The exhaust was glued pretty secure, but I was able to get it out undamaged and in one piece. With the exhaust out of the way, there's now far more room for the axle. Next, I removed the front suspension and steering linkage piece. These cars used a McPherson strut suspension in the front and used a linkage steering system. Both of these will be tricky to build in 1/24th scale, but I'll see what I can do. Otherwise, I'll be going with a less scale but more conventional RC front steering and suspension setup. I ended up taking a chunk of plastic out of the chassis while removing the radiator, but fortunately it's not in a critical place and will be easy to repair. Finally, the last part to go is the engine and transmission. I was able to get them out without damaging the mounts, although I think I'll end up removing them anyway. And here's the completely stripped chassis, ready to have electronics mounted to it. To power the Firebird, I'm using this 130 size high-torque DC motor. I like this design because it has two threaded holes on the front end which allow for easy and secure mounting. I'm hoping that this motor has enough power that I can connect it to the rear axle without any additional gear reduction necessary. I'm also hoping I can achieve a good drive shaft angle since the shaft of the motor is in the center as opposed to down low like on the engine and transmission. The motor will have to sit quite low in the chassis to achieve a nice drive shaft angle. I will need to build a custom motor mount that lets the motor sit as low as possible, which shouldn't be a problem. As you can see, the car is completely stripped down to just the bare chassis and body. From here, I'm ready to start building the car back up into what will hopefully be an epic mini RC drift car. Although I bought this car primarily because I like the body style and it was cheap, so far this looks like a great model kit to do a conversion on. It's got a great one-piece chassis, it's roomy, and it looks like the rear axle I have is going to fit like a glove, so I'm really looking forward to making some progress on this build. But that is all for this video. Thank you all so much for watching, and let me know what you want to see done to the body of this car. I'm still undecided at this point, and I'm interested in any ideas you might have, so let me know in the comment section below. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.